It is a live video.
It is a live video, so now figure out. There.
Hey, look, we're live. Awesome.
There.
And there's a delay.
Oh, interesting.
Yay, new technology.
Okay. So that one needs to stay that far away, but this one's closer in case we want to write a comment to ourselves.
Or reply. Hopefully we'll have other input and we'll be able to reply. Good morning.
Right.
Good afternoon. It's afternoon.
It is. And we decided to do this live because indeed we are looking for input because we're mid-stride in it's not just a question, it's probably a series of questions.
An ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
Evolving and organic.
Yes, it sure is. Now we could... I just want to be able to reach it. Oh, look, there's Cosma.
Hi, Cosma. Hey, and shout out to Alexi for the pretty flowers behind us.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Callie is here. Hi, Callie. So we were just saying that it's fun to do this live. It's an experiment. It's actually even something we're going to do in our professional world because in addition to living together, Aubrey works for me. And so we're experimenting for that reason. But we decided to experiment today this way because...
Hi, Cindy.
because Gabby wants to be in it again, of course. Because we have a complicated series of questions that we're trying to figure out. And we figured if we had the conversation with each other here, it contributes to the Kitchen Table Immunology, plus you all might have opinions that are useful or not. All of it's welcome.
And inside of a challenging conversation, having other people at the table makes for good behavior.
That's right. That is right. So, let me give the brief update, which is that today is day 41. Either that or it's day 48.
It's biblical. It is. It's the biblical
The 40
days.
have already been spent in the desert of a low-grade fever in my body that comes with other symptoms as well, and especially fatigue and lightheadedness, and we don't know what it is yet. And I've had 2 coronavirus tests and they both were negative. And both of those tests, both the regular test and the antibody test, have been redone and we don't know the results yet. And we're purposely having this conversation before we know those results. We'll tell you why in a minute. There's a bunch of other infectious stuff that's been ruled out. We're also waiting on a viral panel. Influenza A and B and the other coronaviruses and things like that. And we've ruled out other autoimmune conditions. And my doc is looking into things like, gosh, how is my B12 level, which is something I already supplement. So that's the condition of things. Everything we've tried to get an answer and everything I've tried to do no longer has changed the terms of this.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably useful to add, since we're clearly not in social distancing parameters, I have been generally pretty healthy. I had a fever for a couple of days that actually seemed to be more a stress response than anything else. And at this point, after 6 weeks of being in the same house, we're not loving up on each other, we're not hugging on each other and anything like that. But at this point, we've kind of relaxed the social distancing because it appears as though if I did catch whatever you've had, whether it's COVID or not, I'm asymptomatic.
Right. You've processed it, right?
Yeah.
There were a couple of other ways you felt pretty crappy, but it all passed.
And like in springtime in Arizona, you know, there is the question of, was this allergies or was this me fighting something off? And at some point, yeah, it's just, I feel pretty confident in my system's ability to handle whatever we've got going on.
That's right. The other reason we have to think that it's something, though, that is infectious, that's generally what my doctor's, her first assumption is. But I know of 3 other people that have had similar experiences to me, just only one other in an extended time frame. And they are all people that there was interaction with, either directly or through a third person. Mm-hmm. So all of that points to that possibility. And meanwhile, I have an autoimmune disease that has never expressed as ongoing low fever, but maybe it chose this moment to shift into that phase. So there's so many possibilities. Mm-hmm. For any of you who are tracking any of our conversation on Facebook, I love the Schrodinger's cat. Can you represent it verbally?
Sure. For those of you that are not familiar with the Schrodinger's cat question, it's this idea that if you have a cat in a box and there's a randomized trigger that could kill the cat or not, after an elapsed period of time, you have to assume that the cat is both alive and dead until you actually open the box to look. And in some ways, our experience of what's been going on inside of our house is very much like that paradox. We both have to assume that we don't have the coronavirus and that we're still open and vulnerable to it. And we have to assume that we do have it as well, and that we could possibly carry it and share it with other people. And so it provides this sort of interesting duality paradox of you know, assuming that you both have it and don't, and that in a way has been really interesting, because even though in a lot of ways the practices are the same about how we engage with the outside world, even just switching perspectives back and forth between am I vulnerable to it or am I a liability to other people has been
predator or prey.
Yeah, it's been this kind of interesting cycling back and forth.
Yeah.
And that's partly what we were going to talk about today as well. But I think first, you were mentioning some really interesting things on fever that you've discovered recently. Would you like to share with our audience?
Sure. So fever is the main symptom. It's the most consistent symptom that I have had. And so as you already know, if you've seen any of our other Kitchen Table Immunology videos, we already think we know a tiny bit about immunology. And we love learning more, and it inspires all sorts of thinking and conversations. And actually, after a conversation I had with someone this morning, I went back to this question of, well, why do I think a fever is significant? Especially given that in those 40 plus days, I think there's only 3 or 4 days that went past 100.4. Mm-hmm. So it's been in a low grade range the whole time. And I have 3 answers about why it's significant. One is that it feels significant. This is a new experience in my body, and I think you have witnessed that. Mm-hmm. I have been more taken out by this than even ankylosing spondylitis. I mean, maybe years and years ago, AS stopped me in my tracks mm-hmm. more, but then I learned to move around it. But this, I can't remember when I worked even a full 40 hours. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is, not true for me, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as an observer, what I've been able to observe is, even though at no one point it's been very rare that I've looked at you and been like, oh my goodness, there's a sick person. You know, the pallor and even the way our hair changes when we're sick and it lays differently. It's been very rare that I've seen that, but in the way that when someone is getting sick or dealing with a lot of pain, there's just a very clear preoccupation in the system. That has been really consistent. Mm-hmm. And that would be what I would say has been the overarching, that's where it's taking you out.
Yeah. It's true. It really is. Hi to Gabby and Ed Guzman. Nice to see you. Or have you see us, I guess. So there's that. The second reason is that historically, I've had one other experience in my life where I've had a lot of low-grade fever. And it was a situation that was my most acute medical crisis. I ended up in the hospital for 19 days. I had 2 major surgeries, and it was the result of a perforation in my bowel. So before anyone knew that's what it was, all we had to go on was that I was experiencing some pain at that point. This one does not come with pain. And a low-grade fever, mostly in the 99s. And the early diagnoses, so what happened is that there was a rupture in my bowel very close to the exit. Mm-hmm. And so that meant fecal matter moved into my pelvis, creating pelvic inflammatory disease. And the infectious mass then closed off my colon. And the fecal matter in my colon backed way up. So I had this low-grade fever, I had pain, but my white blood cell count was marginal. It was still within normal, but the highest number, it was 11 or something in whatever scale they were looking at. And so no one was thinking I really actually had infection. They did a urinalysis and said, well, maybe it's a UTI, but they treated me for UTI, and nothing changed, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And when they did the x-ray, they didn't see anything. They just saw the fecal matter and said, oh, you just got a bad case of constipation. Here's an enema. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that would not have worked at all.
And then later they called and said, we've reviewed the x-rays and that we actually see a mass and we don't know, that was the cancer scare moment and all that kind of stuff. But then it even took them a week or so to figure out really what was going on. So what I know is low-grade fever and not very active white blood cells is how my body responds to actually even pretty big things going on.
Right.
And then the final thing, learning as I did some research this morning, how does fever operate? What is it that happens within the immune system? The immune system turns on, sends pyrogens to the hypothalamus to say, turn up the temperature. And that turning up the temperature, it's one part of the immune system that does that. And then the temperature going up activates other parts of the immune system. So then other ways of responding to the problem kick in. So not only does the temperature make it more inhospitable for whatever the pathogen is in there, it's this mutually beneficial and interactional dynamic between heat and the immune system itself. But the pyrogens, I'd never heard the word pyrogen till I was reading about it this morning, except then interleukin 6, interleukin 1, tumor necrosis factor, these are all the things that are associated with ankylosing spondylitis. These are the parts of the immune system that get dysregulated. And they are the ones that signal the fever. So here's another moment of oh, there's something about my system that operates a little differently in response to pathogen.
Yeah, what I hear inside of that is, in some ways, your system, because you've dealt with a condition that is moderated by the immune system and involves those, your body in some ways is so used to managing them. And in some ways, you even are used to working through them and kind of okay, well, this is just, it's there, but it's not a big deal.
Right. I got life to live.
Exactly. And it's also really useful for those of you who watched our last video to know that all three of those, the interleukin 3, the interleukin 6, and the TNF, the tumor necrosis factor, those are all cytokines.
right?
And, so in Diana's case, this is a very, you are having quite possibly a really atypical experience, and our friend that has RA and has this might also be having a somewhat atypical experience. But it also doesn't mean that in some ways what you guys are experiencing could be possibly a cytokine storm.
Right.
But your systems are already so used to working with it that it gets managed differently.
Right.
And I'm not saying that that's actually what's happening.
No,
it's just
we have no idea. We're just trying
to
think it through.
Yeah.
Because it means we ask different questions, we take in the information differently, and, we probably should have some stock way of saying this during every... Like, the kitchen table means, hey, we're having a conversation. This is not medical advice.
No.
So, amidst all of that, this whole theme of, hey, there's life to be had, well, we're all dealing with that somewhat, right? So how do we, in a pandemic, continue with life? What needs to be continued? What doesn't need to be continued? How do you manage the risk of the things that need to be continued? And we've been grappling with the fact that my answers and Aubrey's answers are different. Like, I don't want to go outside. I'm not going to. I'm just not going to for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Even after I have answers to this, if I get answers to this, I know that I'm in a high-risk category. I'm at least in a complicated category, which... I feel grateful that all of that means that I have access to the tests, right? Because I am in a category that will get tested, and we can use that information to learn together. But I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to risk it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, that's easy to say. It's hard to measure. What does it mean not risking it? Like, I'm not going to stay in my bedroom with my door closed and, right?
Yep.
I'm not going to talk to Nida when she goes walk. I mean, we stay 6 feet away, but if Nida's walking by, we talk.
Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, I am, while I'm not looking to go out and be sick, and I'm not looking to go out and be irresponsible, and I'm not looking to go out and be oblivious to what I'm running into, or what the consequences of my actions might be, part of my nature is, oh, how close to this fire can I get? Like, how, being in, in some ways being stuck inside. And I think I couldn't articulate this even earlier this week. Being inside and reading reports doesn't do as much for me as actually getting out. And, in some ways, because I've been because so much of the body work that I've done, I've had to be so in tune with my body. There's a way in which even reading the information online, it's like, okay, well, that's interesting, but I need to go and have the bioassay. I need to go have that physical experience of, what's actually going on out there. And even to an extent, I actually want to be out in the general populace, partly to actually get the sense of what are the other people out there doing, because that's a really, it's just a valid avenue of information. But for me, it's a really it's one I've developed how to work with it, and I really enjoy it. And at the same time, I live with someone who is immunocompromised, and she's my employer, and she's a good friend of mine. And so without, and also for those of you who know or don't know, I also basically don't have my business running right now. I'm really fortunate to work with Diana. I have another admin position, super fortunate in those respects, but my business, the thing I love doing and love playing with, isn't available. And even though some of my clients are, once we get test results and once we have a clear idea of what's going on, a lot of my clients are confident in their own healthcare measures, or are isolated enough that, within creating a bubble, much like in the kink community or any other sex positive community where you have agreements about what the different barriers are and what fluid swapping looks like and fluid bonding and all of that, they're open to figuring out what that looks like. At the same time, it's such an interesting negotiation to figure out, hey, what works for me as just an individual, and what would I negotiate with my business and my clients and the people that I would engage with outside, And then how do I honor what's going on inside of my home without actually making like me a victim to what's going on over here, or blaming Diana in any way for what's going on? Because that creates a problem, and it's kind of it's like a mid-range problem, right? Like inside of ourselves, where we fight ourselves and we have that blame game with ourselves, then we end up with all sorts of discomfort in our body. We could have it inside of a house, and then we could also have it in the wider collective, in the blame game that we see going on.
Yeah. So just to summarize, we live in a world where no one knows these answers. They are complicated. Different people are making different decisions. There's not an easy way to figure it out. I am 55 with an immunocompromised history. Aubrey is 36 with a go roll in the dirt philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know whether we're the problem and we have to think about protecting other people, or whether what's going on in the household and in this body right now is yet just a different kind of vulnerability that adds to the vulnerability, and please don't bring anything home.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming 100 degrees here in Arizona, and so we've spent a lot of time outside and in the garage and all that kind of stuff, and that option is shrinking.
Yes. Yes. Although, there, and even inside of that, I think I mentioned it the other night, there's also the, how creative can we get inside of this? How, I naturally switch to being more of a night creature during the summer because that's when I get to be outside. But then that, that has rolling impacts of what goes on inside of my other work schedules and stuff like that. So, but it does feel like our world shrunk in the last 4 days, almost. Right. And early. Who said that hell could get here early? Oh, wow, there are a lot of comments.
There are some comments, so let's pause here. So Cosmo's talking about the low-grade fever. She responds to stress with a low-grade fever or fighting off viruses. She's had other symptoms with a low-grade fever, been diagnosed by nurses as it diagnosed. Strange news, strange times. Yes, we can just say yes to that.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. And Cho, perceived risk is an important consideration in how we make sense of how to best respond to the current situation. Amen to that as well. And Cosma, virus definitely raises important questions in how we... Hey, come back. How we relate to each other. Yes. Okay. So we're looking for answers. What's your answer today? Because as Aubrey mentioned, today we're having a relaxed conversation about it, but a couple of days ago this was like, oh my God, we feel overwhelmed by these questions. We don't even begin to know how to navigate them.
Yeah. Let's see, I was thinking about this morning, kind of from the kink and the sex positive community. Like at this point where I'm at we're kind of like in that little interesting space with a new lover where, oh, we had sex without having to talk. Okay, now we're gonna get tested. And then
she's speaking figuratively.
Yes, figuratively.
Just, Mom, Dad, we're not having sex actually.
Yes. No. And I'm like, wait, when was the last time I had sex? And I think at the moment where it's like that we had an engagement that wasn't totally intentional, and now we're gonna wait for some test results. And then I think honestly the best thing that I can think to do is when we do get those test results, basically have like a really open poly conversation with everyone involved, and to go, to explain to the people that I would work with, hey, here was what's up in my house. This is what's been going on. And if you choose to engage with me, these are the criteria that I need in order for it to be okay for me to engage with you. And then share with you, like do the due diligence with you to say, hey, these are the people that I'm considering engaging with. And I think the trick is to not make it a permission conversation.
Right.
And how, and how to do that. And, then to come to you to say, hey, these are the people that I'm considering engaging in. A, how does that land for you? B, do you need some time to work with it and figure it out for yourself? And then C, what do you need in order to make that work?
Yeah.
And then, and at the same time, that's within a really tight bubble. There is the additional conversation of, hey, I'd like to be able to go to the store once a week.
Right.
Right? Like, I'd rather, actually go pick my produce out rather than, and it's been lovely to have people come and bring us food. It truly has been. But, there is something about, even in how I relate to food and herbs and plant medicine and shamanism, I need to be out there, feel it.
Yeah. And I'm struck as I'm listening to you talk that it's like another challenge here. It's not like we just have the conversation once. Because next week and 2 weeks from now and 4 weeks from now, and if there's another peak versus Arizona gets heat protection, there's so many things we don't know, and we have to update the conversation, which is maybe why we could say that one of the benefits or one of the outcomes of this pandemic is it's requiring a whole nother level of communication.
Absolutely.
In order to navigate it. And it's the communication breakdowns that really take us out.
Ooh, I like what Joe is saying so far.
Let's see more. Yeah. Honestly, one of the things about rolling in the dirt that has helped so far is been wonderful. Aubrey set up composting. She planted all these things. Thanks again to Lexi for her contributions to that.
Absolutely.
And it helped. It helped for a while.
It did. And I wouldn't say that, in some ways it's still helping. But I love and I'll credit Nikki Golly with this. I love the bucket analogy for allergies. You get all of these irritations in your environment, and then eventually it eventually overflows the bucket, and that's when your allergies show up.
Right.
Well, in some ways this is very similar, but I would actually say it's like a funnel. I'm suddenly separated from the resources that I would use to keep myself balanced and employed in the ways that I would normally be employed and stimulated. And so I've brought in additional practices, and when they're brand new, it's it kind of consumes me in a way that it's oh, this is great, this is really working. I literally weeded 2 full trash cans in the first few weeks of weeds from the front yard, and it was marvelous. And
there's still more weeds out there.
There are more weeds out there. It's a little hot.
Less motivating.
But in some ways, as time goes on, there's this funnel effect where what was working isn't sufficient anymore, both because it's not new anymore, but also because there's this time, the longer that we're under stress or the more that we're in the unknown, it adds additional requirements on the system to provide that feeling normal.
Which reminds me, I wanted to say something about why we're doing this before we have the test results. Because the very seductive thing is there is an answer. And we're going to get that answer. And we don't have to do the hard work about the unknown. We just wait for that answer. And then that answer in a linear way determines what we do and gives us permission and explains everything. And we don't live in that world.
No. And that's compounded because we don't even have, even if we get your answers, we don't have enough answers outside of us.
That's right.
We don't know if getting it provides immunity. We don't know how long that immunity lasts. We don't even know, we really don't know how many strains are out there, and if you've got one, if you're possibly susceptible to another.
That's right. We don't know what the community spread is like here in North Scottsdale, all of Phoenix, Maricopa County. We only have whatever testing's getting done.
Yep. And the added, because this is a respiratory thing, there's an added concern of, it's been really, this is what I thought the other day, it's been really, really windy. So yeah, you did test negative for valley fever, but right? And not that's not a contagious disease,
right?
But it does, it adds a lot of that, and God forbid we have another type of cold come and run through that isn't this coronavirus, right? So yeah, I think that the solution in a lot of ways is to keep really open communication.
and keep our life as simple as possible. So if I even just take this back to our learning about the immune system, right? If the more I dive into every aspect of the immune system, the more I just kind of flatline. I can't take it in anymore. I lose my way. I have no idea what any of it's saying, and it's all just a bunch of ILs and Ts and natural killer, and it's what?
Mm-hmm.
But if I break it down so I can see a piece of it, or if I break down my experience, and I develop the understanding bite by bite, that turns into something robust and resilient. And I mean, this is probably my way of saying that the throw the doors open as a way of ending stay-at-home orders is, I don't buy that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually I think what that brings up is, this idea of, if each of us have been, part of what I think that the brilliant opportunity that we have here is we had gotten to a place as a collective where we were so spread thin and we were so global in so many ways. Our food comes from all over the place. We have people in our community that travel from Europe and Australia on a regular basis to come in. I went to Hawaii for a class. Like, we just got used to the convenience of globalism. And it's powerful. That's potent. It's really, really amazing. And at the same time, there is something to be said for knowing what is me and mine. And we've had this tremendous shrinking. And now the opportunity is to start to expand back out in a sober, in a methodical, in a really considered way, so that rather than me going down to the Trader Joe's that's all the way down in Tempe, figuring out, hey, what does it mean to go to the local Trader Joe's, and what does it mean to go to the local Sprouts, and how safe do I feel inside of there? What does it mean to go there 3 or 4 times? Right. And have those experiences and kind of sample it? What does it look like to expand my practice into seeing 3 people a week? Right. And then what does that look like for a month?
Are there new agreements that you make in order to do body work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Are there masks involved during a massage? Or right? There's all these questions to sort out.
Right. Yep. And to take those, in a way, the rational way to go about it is pick one variable. Right. Pick one variable, open that up, explore that. How does that work? What does it look like? Okay, good. Do we have a decent sense of what's going on? Do we have actual confidence in what's going on?
Yeah.
And then can we push the boundary out a little bit further?
Right. So we've been going for a half an hour already.
We just have to talk for half an hour.
We do.
It's a half an hour of emptying our basket.
I guess it is. And here is Cosma. It's awesome to have the conversation before knowing. We will not know. Being confined in my home's been tough. Yes, normal as soon as you're healthy.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's been a certain amount of inside of our situation where, I think in some ways it was like, hanging out at the house for 2 to 4 weeks, she'll be better by then. Not a problem. I can hang with that. And then 2 to 4 weeks passes, and then it's like, this is still going on. And
now the caged animal comes out.
Right. 6 weeks, it's doable. But at some point not having, there is a sense of not having the sense of when it might be over.
Yeah, right.
Does become really challenging.
Yeah. And, that piece deserves respect, especially because that one is so universal. Mm-hmm. Right? There's no way that it's not just you or us. It's not just, hey, if you adjust whatever it takes, that makes it go away, because the press of the collective version of that question is so big. Holly's watching. Hi,
Holly.
But bye, Holly, because I think we're done, unless anybody has an opinion and what is going to simplify our life and tell us what to do. There's a little bit of a delay we've noticed in watching We've got both. We've got this one set up here because we thought we would watch the comments on this one, but no, we're figuring it out.
Oh, get your sleep, honey.
Yes, please sleep, Cosmo. You've got some recovery to do. Sending love and prayers. Bye, Cindy. Yeah, I think it's time.
Okay.
It's time for the closing apple.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
We only have 2 apples left. Send apples.
All right, you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. A wonderful week.
Bye.